Thanks for joining us for this in-depth tutorial on the School and Student Services application for tailored tuition at the Ellis School. We're going to dive into the application itself so that you can see the dashboard, you can see all the components of the application. We'll look through the checklist together. We'll talk through exactly where to look in your documents to reference information that's asked of you. And we'll work through to the end so you're very, very clear before you get started about exactly what you need for a successful application. Join me.
To begin, you'll start on the login page, which is called the Family Portal. If you're returning to this application having done it already in the past, you'll use your email and password that you've selected. If you are new to this process, you'll want to go here for new users to create an account. For today, we'll be using our admission account to walk through a faux application. So we'll be taking a look at a hypothetical family. We've invented information for them just to give you a sense of what the application requires, the kind of information you'll be asked for, and best preparation tactics to make sure that you're ready to get going. So let's go ahead and log in. When you log into School and Student Services, this is where you will begin. You'll start on your dashboard, which will show you the range of options that you have available to you and the steps that you'll follow to make sure you're completing the application. You'll want to make sure that you're applying for the application year 2021-2022, so you can verify in the upper right-hand corner. If you've begun the application, you'll have been notified by the system that you're applying for the approximate school year, and that's how you want to proceed. You always have resources available to you, such as the Parent Financial Statement Workbook right here on the left-hand side. Once you've had a chance to review those documents, as well as some of the resources provided by the Ellis School, you'll go ahead and begin your Parent Financial Statement, or PFS. If you are somebody who loves a good checklist, this process is for you. You can look along the side here to see all of the different sections that you'll be asked to complete. We've unlocked a couple of additional sections that may not be relevant to every applicant, such as business and farm information, but I want to make sure to go through that just so you have a sense of what will be asked of you in case that's relevant to your family. Helpfully, at the beginning of each section, you'll see a little bit of guidance that looks like this. It tells you what's in the section and what you need in order to prepare. So let's jump in so you can get a sense of what you'll be asked for as you move through the application for tailored tuition. To begin, you'll be asked for parent and guardian information. This is fairly straightforward biographical information about your family. You can see here we've got Emily Scott as our stand-in for parent or guardian A. You'll answer information about name, birth date, if there are any particular circumstances that will affect the family personally this year, you'll indicate those here. Of note in particular is if you're expecting a child, you can indicate that here. If you've completed the application in the past, there are a couple of new elements this year, and this is one of those. You'll provide contact information. It's helpful to note that any section that's highlighted in this pink color is required. Any section that is white is not required, but we do recommend that you provide as much information as possible to give the committee as much context as is available for the review of your application. You'll be asked about your work information here, and then here you'll be asked about any additional parents living in the household with parent or guardian A. If you have an additional adult, you'll fill out their information here, parent, guardian B. It's important to note that if you've done this application in the past, if you're returning to this application, you want to make sure that you are consistent about who in your household is parent or guardian A and who is parent or guardian B to ensure that your applications line up across years. Provide contact information, handy buttons here, same as parent A. You can auto-populate some of these fields for you. Provide work information for parent B. And then here at the bottom, there's a question about additional parents. If your child has multiple households, this is the section where you will indicate that. So if your child spends time in multiple households, has an additional parent or guardian, you'll want to indicate yes in this dropdown in order to provide information about that additional parent. Multiple households should complete discrete applications for tailored tuition. So the additional household will complete their own application. Your application will be completed by you. Those are completely confidential from one another. There will be no access by the other household to your information, but they will be linked in the name of the applicant. So do be sure that if your child has a nickname or a preferred name, that you're all using the same name, first and last, for the applicant in order for the information to link on the back end of the database. Once you complete this section, you'll hit Save and Next. If you need to take a break after this, completely understandable, you'd use the Save and Exit button. And a pro tip, you want to make sure that you use only the navigation tools that are provided to you within the application. So try to resist using the back or the forward buttons in your browser, as that may cause you to lose some of the information that you've entered. Next, we'll move on to Applicant Information. So the applicant is, of course, the student on whose behalf you're applying for tailored tuition. If you have more than one applicant, you'll use this button in the upper right-hand corner, Save and Add Another Applicant. So our applicant, in the context of this application, is named Healy. Healy is in 4th grade going into 5th grade in 2021. We're entering her information here. And we will be entering non-applicant dependent information next. So again, if you have multiple students in your household who are applying to the Ellis School, you would save and add another applicant. If you have additional dependents, so those would be students who are not applying to the Ellis School, or parents who live with you for whom you provide greater than 50% financial support, those would be non-applicant dependents. You'll enter their information in the next section. The context of this application, Healy has a sister named Ruby who goes to a school called Not Yet Ellis. We'll answer a question about her 529 savings plan. In this case, Ruby does not have a 529 savings plan. If we had additional students in the household or additional dependents, we would click here on this button to add additional dependents. For our purposes, this is a family of 4, so 2 adults and 2 children in a single household. A handy tool in the application is this household summary, so this will give you a chance to check your work. You'll be required to click this radio button in order to move on to the next section, so make sure you review this carefully. You want to make sure that all of your applicants fall under here, all of your dependents fall under here, and note that you do not need to double enter your applicants and dependents. So each child should fall under only one category, applicant or dependent, not under both. Next, we'll move on to school selection. This is where you indicate the school or schools that you would like to have access to your application, to your parent financial statement once you've completed and submitted it. So you want to make sure that you are entering the Ellis School here in order for us to be able to view all of the information that you input into the application. You can enter our SSS code, or alternatively, you can simply search for us by city or zip code. Enter the school name here. Our city is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15206, and that will pull us up right here. If you'd like to look directly for us, our SSS code is 2974, and that will bring you directly to us. Then you want to make sure that you apply Healy, in this case, or your child, your applicant, to the Ellis School in order to be able to submit your application for viewing to us once it's completed. All right, so we've got the easy parts out of the way. We're going to move on to our family income information. You can see here that the application is comprised of a couple of different sections related to income, assets and debts, expenses. Any business income information or debt information will be entered here if you are an independent business owner. And then there's a monthly section. So up until this part, I encourage you to think about all of these sections in an annual way. If you've not yet completed a family budget, now is a great time to do so. That will help guide some of the answers to these questions. You also want to make sure you have your tax documents handy. So again, we're applying for the 2021-2022 school year. You want to make sure that you have your previous year tax documents. So in this case, those will be your 2019 tax documents. And once you completed your 2020 taxes, you'll be uploading those documents, those supporting documents, at a later date. We encourage those no later than April 20th. If you have questions about that or anything else, you're always welcome to reach out to us. We're happy to provide guidance. You can reach us at admissions@theellisschool.org, or you can give us a call at 412-661-4880, and we're happy to discuss any questions you may have. All right, let's jump into family income. We're going to start here with basic tax information. Remembering, of course, that if you want to have a better sense of what will be expected of you in each section, you can click on the heading and that will take you to this overview. We've got a tax primer document here that you can click on. And again, this is a checklist of items that will be helpful for you to have easy at hand to help reference information for your family and enter it into the application. So moving on to section 6, basic tax information. The first thing you'll be asked is whether or not you've completed or are using estimated tax information for 2020. We encourage applications for tailored tuition to be submitted by January 1st, 2021. And so in that case, families will be completing this application with estimated tax information for 2020. You'll indicate information about your filing status, your adjusted gross income, whether or not you scheduled a file A, so did you itemize your deductions. You'll enter information about your total federal income taxes. And again, paying attention to the pink fields as required. The white fields are helpful but not required in order to move on with the application. You'll also be entering a little bit of information here about whether or not you received interest or dividend income from investments. And essentially, questions like these open up additional portions of the application that are relevant to you in the case that you do have those as part of your filing. So in this case, we've indicated that the Scott family owns a business, one business, and that has unlocked this business and farm section here, which we'll take a look at together in a moment. Once you've got this squared away, this essentially sets up the format for your information collection. You can hit save and head to next. Section 7 focuses on your total taxable income. So you'll begin with salary and wages. And in the case that you have multiple parents or guardians in your household, you'll be reporting on income for both adults in the case that both earn salary or wages. Those, of course, can be documented in your W-2, and you'll note that there are these helpful little blue circles with a white eye for information next to many of the sections. You can hover over those in order to see additional guidance or information about where you can look in order to get the information that is being asked of you in these fields. Similarly, you'll note that starting in this section and throughout the application, you'll be answering information related to 2 separate years. So the left-hand column is for 2020. So again, you'll be referring to the kinds of documents that will inform your filing. So for many families, 2019 tax documents will be a helpful reference. Many families will have consistent information in those documents year to year. You can also refer to pay stubs, and other receipts or documentation of expenditures that you've collected over the course of a year in order to help you make your most accurate assessment of what your 2020 income and spending was like or will be like by the end of the year. You want to make sure that the totals that you're entering are for the full year, not just up until the point when you're completing the application. And so you may look at your wages in your pay stub and project forward until the end of the year in order to get that complete calculation for taxes withheld or deductions withheld. And again, if you have any questions about this or how to estimate the information that you're putting in, you can always reach out to us for guidance. For 2021, we want you to use your best information. So just to give you a sense here, we've added some changes for the Scott family to document what we mean. So in this case, parent guardian A, whose annual income is $120,000, is expecting consistent income in 2021. So she's projecting forward that she'll earn $125,000. Her income goes up a little bit each year. She gets a cost of living adjustment in January, and that's pretty stable and standard for her. So that will go up to $125,000. Parent B, on the other hand, expects to earn $92,000 in 2020. And this is an application that we've used over a couple of years now. So you can see that the 2020 estimated information that's provided right here is pulling from the application that was submitted on this family's behalf last year. So if you're new to this process, you wouldn't expect to see this. But if you are a returning family, you've done this application before, you'll see some helpful references to information you've entered in past applications in some of these sections. So for parent B in 2020, the outcome of their earned wages will be $92,000, but in 2021 they're actually expecting to go to about to half time. So they're expecting their income to be cut nearly in half when that change takes effect. So they're projecting their future income to go from $92,000 to $50,000. This, of course, represents a pretty significant change for this family. It's critical that we capture that information. And when we get to the end of the application here, other considerations, this is an open text box. We'll take a look at it together. And that's a place where you want to articulate any significant changes for your family, anything really outstanding for 2021 that you'd like to draw the committee's attention to. So an income change such as this, or an employment change, any circumstances that have affected your family in particular in 2020 due to the pandemic, changes to income or expectations around expenditures related to the pandemic. All of those will be documented throughout the application and should be explained in further detail in the other considerations section. So for dividends and interest, this section here, again, you can hover over these helpful eyes and they'll tell you exactly where to look. So in this case, for total interest income, you'd be looking at your 1099. You'd see line 1. It provides additional context about what should and shouldn't be included. So for example, in this section, you are not to report the value of your income generating investment accounts here, rather that you'd put those in the family assets section. So do be sure as you're reviewing each of these sections to read the instructions ahead of each section where they exist so that you're entering exactly the information that is intended for this section and not double counting or omitting any information that's relevant for your family. Next, we have adjustments to income. This is going to be Schedule 1, line 36. And again, another helpful tip here, if you're using your 2020 forms, you can see that some of the locations for the information has changed from 2019. So you'll be referred to line 22 if you're using your 2020 forms as opposed to line 36 for your 2019 documents. Again, always a good idea to hover over these information eyes or read the instructions to ensure that you're entering the information that's being asked. Here we have other taxable income. So you want to be sure, in the case that you are certain you have other taxable income, you'll be sure to enter that here. If you're not sure, you'll note that all of these sections here are pink. So you do have to review each of these questions individually. In the case that they're not relevant to you, you'd enter a 0. In the case that they are, you would enter the value associated with that form. So this asks about taxable amount of any IRA distributions, any taxable amounts of pensions or annuities that you received in 2020, Social Security benefits received by you or any member of your family are entered here. If alimony is a consideration for your family, this is where it's captured. If you have refunds that you received in 2020, those would be entered here. If you received capital gains, you would note those here in 7O. Enter any other gains or losses in 2020 and project those forward for 2021 in 7P. In this case, for the Scott family, they have an additional property from which they earn rental income, so that information is entered here. Again, it points you to exactly the forms as part of your filing where you would draw this information. If you received any unemployment compensation for 2020, so those would not be captured under your wages up above, but rather unemployment benefits, you would be entering those here in 7R. If you have any additional taxable income, you want to capture that here. And in the case that you're entering information that's sort of general like that, where you're not asked to itemize in the moment, make a note as you're completing the application and be sure to enter the details under other considerations. You can double check your work here at the bottom. It should tally this up for you. So you can see that in the case of the Scott family, they've got zeros across the board, except for in 7Q where they've entered information about the rental income that they earn as a family. Once you've wrapped up this section, you can hit Save and Next, or Save and Exit, of course, if you need a break. And keep in mind that the system will only let you move on once you've completed all of the pink fields. So if you've left anything blank that you needed to complete, or if you haven't completed it in the fashion that's needed by the system, it will give you an error message at the top and ask you to correct those fields before you move on. Next, we've got total non-taxable income. So this is broken out separately from your taxable income and fall under a handful of categories. So if child support is a consideration in your family, again, if you have non-taxable Social Security benefits, again, you saw taxable Social Security benefits under Section 7. These are non-taxable Social Security benefits to be entered here. And then additional non-taxable benefits. So in the case of the Scott family, they've made a tax-deferred pension contribution of $5,000 in 2020, and that's documented here. Again, that's pre-tax, so it's not showing up in their salaries and wages, withheld. Other examples include employer contributions to self-held retirement accounts, cash value of welfare benefits received in 2020. If you are a family that receives SNAP benefits, you would enter that information here. If your family receives veterans benefits, the cash value of those benefits should be estimated here. Disability benefits, total income received from workers' comp, and total value of all allowances you receive for housing, food, and other considerations will be tallied here. Again, hover over those I's to make sure that you're entering the correct information from the correct source. Other non-taxable income, if you receive cash support from any relatives, friends, or family, you would document that here. That's especially relevant in the case, for example, that you have grandparents, for example, that are contributing to tuition. If they provide those funds directly to you instead of directly to the school, you would document those the receipt of that cash support here. In some families, grandparent participation, friends, or family participation, they'll send it directly to the school, in which case that does not sort of pass through your financials, so you do not need to document that here. It's specific to your family's circumstances. If you received support in lieu of child support from a separated or divorced spouse, please enter that here. Any income credits received in 2020 will be documented in 8N. And then total income earned from tax-exempt investments will be entered in 8O. Again, you can see for the Scott family, none of these circumstances is relevant, so they've entered zeros across the board, but all of these fields are pink, so you must complete them with a 0 or other numeric value in order to move on. Last but not least, we have a miscellaneous category for any other non-taxable income. So anything that isn't captured here that comes to your family, you'll want to document here. And again, because you're not asked to itemize in this section, you'd want to provide any additional details under other considerations in section 20. Once you've completed this section, you move on to applicant income. So here we're looking specifically at Healy because she is the only applicant in the family. She is going into 5th grade next year, so she does not earn any income. So the answer here to this question about income earned in 2020 is no. But she does have a 529 savings plan with this student as the beneficiary. We've indicated yes. The current value of that is $10,000. And this asks you a couple of different questions about 529 accounts. It's possible for you as a parent or guardian to hold an account, for someone else, a family or friend, to hold a savings plan in that student's name with them as the beneficiary. And it's also possible for them to have a savings plan in their own name. You'll also answer questions in this section about whether or not the student applicant has any assets. And it gives you a sort of checklist here of what's to be included. So if the student has a savings account, any stocks, bonds, inheritances, trust funds, or real estate held in the child's name. You would enter those here. You do not need to include information about life insurance policies, collections, or personal property. All right, if you've made it this far, you may want to save and next. Just keep plowing through and head on to the family assets and debts section, which begins with questions about real estate. So in this case, the Scott family does own the home that they currently live in. So they've answered yes to this drop down. If you are a renter, you'll answer no, and you'll be asked questions about your rent. A quick note there for renters, it's most common for those of us who rent to think about those expenses as a monthly expense as opposed to an annual expense. Please be sure to pay special attention to what you're being asked in that section because it does ask you about annual expenses related to your rent as opposed to monthly. So please be sure to annualize those costs in the case that you haven't done so yet in your family budget. In the case of the Scott family, we're looking at information related to the home that they've purchased. So they've indicated the year that they purchased, the purchase price, the current market value. That's one that we get a lot of questions about. And you're invited to use any of the sort of web-based tools like Zillow or realestate.com to get a sense of what your home's current value is. And then the unpaid principal of your first mortgage goes here. So again, this is another place where you want to pay special attention to the information that's being asked of you. These are the annual payments on your first mortgage. So you do not enter your monthly mortgage payment here, but rather the full year's worth of payments. And this total should include property taxes, interest payments, insurance payments, and any association fees that you pay. And make sure you total those up for the year. If you have a second mortgage on your home or a home equity loan, you would answer yes to this question. It would drop down some additional considerations for you to enter. In the case of the Scott family, they do not have a second mortgage, but they do own additional real estate. So again, if you own any additional real estate, if your name is on the deed, you would enter that information here. So in this case, the Scott family owns one additional property. They've entered information here about the gross annual income for the rental of that property. If you own additional property but do not collect rent, you would enter 0 here. And then if you have maintenance expenses, gross property expenses for all properties, so again, in this case, the Scott family has only one, but if you have multiple, you're entering a total sort of bucket of information here about all of those properties, and then you'll be asked to itemize below. So you're asked information about the property's address, purpose, the purchase price, the current market value, the same as the home ownership information requested above. And then you have an open text box here to provide any additional context. So in the case that your family has an additional home where an elderly parent is living, or if you do have a rental income coming to you, you can provide additional context and information that's helpful to the committee to assess sort of how this additional asset plays into your family's financial picture. Next, we move on to section 11, which focuses on vehicles. So in this case, you're asked about cars, boats, or other recreational vehicles owned or leased by your family. So this is a great moment for me to mention that you want to make sure that you're not double entering information at any point. So you can see here that we're breaking out this section on real estate, we're breaking out this section on vehicles. That means that when we get to the next section, section 12, other assets and debts, we won't be double entering information about the debt that you hold for your home or for your vehicles. All of that information is captured here, so you do not need to include it in future sections. These questions are fairly straightforward. Any notes that are helpful to the committee tend to be things about current or future maintenance or the expected life of a car. So in particular, if you've paid off a vehicle, but it's getting sort of long in the tooth and you're anticipating that you may need a new one in the next year or two, this is a great place to note that because you may have a significant expense that you're anticipating or saving for in the future, but you're not currently paying down now. So we've entered information about both vehicles. Similar to the household information, you enter information about whether you own or lease, the current market value of your vehicle. So again, if you were to go to Kelley Blue Book, and look up what the trade-in value might be for your vehicle in its current condition. That's how you would derive this information. And then your current debt, what you have left to pay, and any notes related. You can include those here. So in this case, this family has one vehicle that's been paid off and one vehicle on which they still have current debt and are making regular payments. Now on to other assets and debts. We've got information here about bank accounts. So this is the cumulative value of your checking and savings accounts. You want to put that total here, and then any information about your investments. So this is market value minus debt. And then again, this provides some additional context for the information that the application is seeking. For your retirement plans, you'll itemize that information here. You'll be asked about accounts held by both parent and guardian A or parent guardian B, but you are asked the sum for those accounts. And then you'll be asked information about total household contributions for different types of accounts that your family may hold. Under debts, you'll be asked separately about consumer debt. So remember, you've already entered information about your home as well as your vehicle. So this is specific debt from all credit cards that you've not already reported elsewhere in the parent financial statement. So there's no need to double enter debt once you've accommodated it elsewhere in the application. So in this case, this is a family that has a revolving balance of about $2,000 on a MasterCard that they typically accrue and then pay down each month. If you have educational debt, you're entering information about that here. If you've taken a loan with a loan company, if you owe to any friends or family, or if you have any additional outstanding debt, you enter information about those here. This is a section that offers very specific guidance about what does and doesn't qualify when you're thinking about what the application is seeking information about regarding debt. So please be sure to include information about expenses such as past legal fees or funeral expenses, past business debt, debts from investments, any medical or dental expenses, but you again are not double entering information that you've already entered elsewhere, such as information about your mortgage, any information about your current business that's captured elsewhere. If you have debts for routine expenses that you're expecting to pay off just sort of in the course of your family's financial life, any travel expenses or school expenses should not be entered here, and that is because you will be entering them elsewhere. And then this final question is a question about the amount of the debt that you intend to pay off during 2021. So this is essentially looking forward. In this case, this family has about $40,000 for educational debt, and they're anticipating paying off $5,000 of that total debt. All right, cooking right along. Next, we're on to family expenses. So this is a critical section of the application. This is where you outline the expenses related to your children's education. So in this case, we'll be looking first at Healy. So of course, in this family, we've got Healy and Ruby. So we've got two students for whom we'll be providing support, and both of those students are attending private schools. So for Healy, she was in a tuition-based school in 2020-2021, so we've answered yes to this question. If in the current school year, 2020-2021, your child is not in a tuition-paying school, you would answer no to this question, and then you would be only answering questions about next school year. So this is essentially a worksheet of expenses related to your child's schooling and how those expenses are paid. So you enter the estimated full cost of tuition for this applicant for the academic year 2020-2021. So again, if your child is in a tuition-paying school, you should have a sense of what the full rate of tuition is for that year, even if you've not completed payments for the full year just yet. You're also asked about additional costs of attendance. So busing, books, uniforms, fees, you can put that total here. You want to enter information in this section about the contributions that your family is making toward that tuition. So in this case, Healy's tuition is $21,500, and the family is contributing $15,000 toward tuition. They're also receiving $3,000 from grandparents, so their total family contribution is $18,000. so that there is indeed a difference between the total tuition, $21,500, and the $18,000 that this family is contributing, which means that the balance is covered by tailored tuition adjustments. Then you can see that we've switched to the 2021-2022 school year, so projecting ahead. And in the case that you aren't sure what the rate of tuition will be at the school in the coming year, so if you're completing this by the January 1st recommended deadline, tuition rates for the 21-22 school year won't yet have been posted. Please use the current rates for the current school year in this section, and those will be updated automatically on your behalf once the rates for the 21-22 school year are published later in January. Any additional or estimated household contributions would be documented here. So in the case that you anticipate a similar contribution from your family as the Scott family does, they're anticipating, again, being able to pay $15,000 for Healy and $3,000 from grandparents. If that may change for you next year, so in this case, they're holding steady despite an expected decrease in family income. But if tuition for your family, in order for it to be a sustainable contribution, needs to change, this is where you would document that information. So in 2021, you would indicate the amount that you would pay from your immediate family, any contributions for friends and family, and in the case that your child is contributing from any assets or earnings of their own, that would be documented here. The same types of questions are asked on Ruby's behalf. So you'll see that you'll go through a similar set of questions for each child you've indicated is in a tuition charging school. And you want to make sure, again, that you're documenting separately the amount of money that you would be contributing as an immediate family to the child's education, and then any income coming, any contributions coming from friends and family down here. And then if you have plans for that additional dependent to attend school, you'll enter those details at the very bottom. Again, this is a critical section, so if you need any additional guidance, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, admissions@theellisschool.org or 412-661-4880. We're happy to provide additional guidance or to walk through this section. Of course, one of the most significant expenditures that families are making is for tuition, and we want to be sure that you're entering that information correctly. Next is section 14, other expenses. So this is the section where you'll enter information about health expenses, fairly straightforward information about whether you hold health insurance through an employer or perhaps through the Affordable Care Act, if you have copays or out-of-pocket costs, if you hold accounts like an FSA or an HSA account, and you'll be asked to itemize those expenditures right here in 14E. You'll note again that you have your 2020 section as well as your 2021 section. So if you're expecting those costs to change for you in the coming year, please be sure to indicate that here and note in the itemized section what you anticipate those changes to be comprised of. If yours is a family that has child support or alimony as part of your financial picture, you'll be asked to break out those details here in this section. And then under additional expenses, this is a place where a lot of families will spend a fair bit of time sort of sorting out expenses related to the other components of their life. So this is the spot where you're expected to document information about utilities. If you make charitable donations to nonprofit organizations, you would note those here. In this case, the Scott family has made a $500 donation to the Ellis Fund, the annual fund for Ellis. If yours is a family that has annual fees for clubs or dues for an organization to which you belong, you'd enter that information here and be sure to itemize. And then lessons or camps for your child, your total would be here, and this would be your total across all children in your family, and then be sure to itemize. This is a field where you need to enter a detail as well as a total. This is a place where you'll be prompted to revisit the information that you've entered if you've not formatted it that way. Next, you'll enter information about the total amount you've paid for vacations for members of your household in 2020. Of course, we were all constrained this year, so that field may be different this year than it would be in others, but you want to make sure you include information there about 2020. And then any additional or unusual expenses you incurred will be documented here. So again, if you have particular expenses related to changes for your family because of the pandemic, you can note those here. Other additional expenses to include are itemized here. And then you'll want to break out those expenses or document the expenditures here in 14T. We'll look quickly at this section here, business information, just so you have a sense of the kinds of questions that are asked. Even if you are not a business holder, just stick with us for 2 minutes here while we breeze through this. So we've entered information here, hypothetically, about a consulting business held by this family. You'll be asked about income, expenses, and assets and debts related to this business. So this is really just so you can see the kinds of questions that are asked. We've entered zeros across the board, but it asks for gross receipts and sales, gross profit, other business income, and then it does calculate that total for you at the bottom of the section. The same is true of expenses, so you want to make sure this is a more comprehensive section, and these little I's will help refer you to exactly the places in your tax filings, your business tax filings, that you want to refer to in order to provide a comprehensive overview of your assets, expenses, and income. Last but not least, we have assets and debts. And that will ask, again, questions that can be drawn from the documents related to your business, and will show you the total. I want to circle back quickly here to expenses. This question is particularly important, 17A. Salary, wages paid to you and your spouse do not include profit or loss from your business or farm. So again, if you're an independent business owner and you pay yourself, you would be entering information here. You don't need to double enter information up here in basic tax information as well as in this section. Be sure that you're entering only in one section. And last but not least, we have this summary. So this gives you an opportunity to sort of check the overview of your work. Again, in this case, this is an active business, but that hasn't had any action this year. So you're seeing zeros across the board. If this is relevant for your family, you should take some time to double check these figures and make sure that they are an accurate reflection of the information that you've entered in sections 15 through 18. Last but not least, we've got monthly income and expense statement. So this is a place where you're going to shift gears. You're really going to refer to your family's budget, and you're going to enter information about your monthly income and expenses. So this is really a checks and balances to the application. Up until this point, we've been looking at it from an annual view, and now we're looking at it from a monthly view. So you will be asked about your monthly income. You can see here that we've got the take-home pay for the Scott family, as well as the income that they're earning from their rental property. If they had alimony or child support payments, those would be documented here. And then we move into expenses. So monthly housing expenses are broken out here. Monthly tuition and childcare expenses. So tuition being separate from childcare, like after school programming, or if you have a babysitter or somebody else providing care for your child, those are broken out separately here. And each section does have a subtotal, so you can get a sense of sort of what your building expenses look like for each section. Be sure that you're breaking out the expenses related to each category as you're asked, and estimating. So, if you have a $500 bill once a year for maintenance and repairs, you can imagine that you're budgeting for that in a monthly way here. You've got the opportunity to document your monthly healthcare expenses, monthly food expenses, and then miscellaneous expenses. Please note that student loan payments go here under monthly miscellaneous, whereas retirement savings and debt payments, so this is corresponding specifically to consumer debt, should be outlined here in monthly debt. At the bottom, you'll see your monthly total income, your monthly total expenses, and then whatever your net is. And this could be positive, it could be negative, and you'll be asked to provide some additional context for that monthly income and speak specifically to any net, positive or negative, that appears at the bottom of your calculation. This is a really easy place for families to inadvertently include some extra zeros as they're plugging in. or to sort of mistakenly switch gears back to an annual cost when asking questions about healthcare expenses. So please do check your work here and make sure that this calculation lines up. Next, we're finally on to that other considerations section. So this is the open text box that I've been referring to throughout. And this is where you share any details or itemizations that weren't captured elsewhere and any particular information about changes to your family circumstances or anticipated changes to family circumstances that will be relevant to the considerations of the Tailored Tuition Committee. This is essentially a spot to tell your story. So you've focused exclusively on the quantitative up until this point. This is where you can fill in the details. So any point in the application where you've been thinking to yourself, gosh, I wish I, yeah, that's the number, but it doesn't tell the whole story. This is where you can fill in those details to make sure that the committee has all of the information that they need in order to review a holistic picture of your family's finances. Last but not least, we've got additional questions here. So this is asking you to verify the amount of money per student applicant that you and your family, including grandparents, can realistically afford to pay for tuition annually. So if you need to, you can refer back to section 13 where you did the breakout related to expenses for tuition. But this is just asking you to put into sort of your own words and to verify the amount that you expect your family to contribute to tuition for each child that you would pay for education. And then finally, if you've applied to any outside organizations for assistance with your child's tuition, so if you belong to a community organization that provides scholarships to students, or if you're seeking scholarships outside of the tailored tuition application process, you would indicate that here. And then you're done. You finished all 21 sections. So once you've completed, you would save and exit, and then you'll come back to your dashboard where you will pay and submit. So until you take that final step of paying and submitting, the schools where you have subscribed won't be able to see your information. So you want to be absolutely sure that you take this final step. The application fee for the 21-22 school year is $55. If the information that you input into the PFS qualifies you for a fee waiver, that will be applied automatically. And in that case, you will simply need to submit your application. There will not be a fee. That is not something that the Ellis School or other schools subscribing to SSS have control over. It's dictated based exclusively on the information that you enter into your parent financial statement. So if you do have questions about that, you can reach out directly to SSS to address those with them. Last but not least, this final section, manage documents. This is where you're going to want to go ahead and upload the supporting documents that are required. So for the Ellis School, those uploads include your 2019 tax documents. So at the time when you submit this by January 1st, 2021, you want to include your previous year tax documents for reference. If you're returning to this application, you're a family who's done this in the past, you will have already uploaded those during the spring when you submitted those your tax filings for the 2019 school year. But if you're new to us, or for some reason you didn't yet submit those documents, if you got an extension, you'll want to be sure to upload those by January 1st so that they can be taken into consideration with your application. And then your 2020 tax documents will be uploaded as soon as you complete them and no later than April 20th. And if you run into any questions or you need support about that, you can always reach out to us. We're happy to help, or SSS is happy to help as well. It's helpful for you to make sure you have digital copies of those documents that are saved as PDFs rather than JPEGs or any other format in order for the upload to work successfully. So now you have a full sense of exactly what's required of you in order to successfully complete the parent financial statement. You've got this overview on the left-hand side, all these handy green check marks to make you feel great about your progress. You can refer at any point to the headings of each section to have a clear idea of what you'll be asked for and what you need in order to reference. And as I've said many, many times, you won't hesitate to reach out to us at admissions@theellisschool.org or 412-661-4880 for help, We're standing by. We're happy to offer support. If there's a particular section that you'd like to troubleshoot with our support, we're happy to help. And at any point, if you have specific questions about the outcome of your application, whether you should apply, how you might prepare, we hope you won't hesitate to be in touch. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Be sure to stay in touch, and best of luck with your 2021-2022 School and Student Services application for tailored tuition at the Ellis School.